It is Davin Bellamy here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. Davin, I tell you, it's not the most fun conversation when you're kind of looking back on a loss here. Some of our folks, including me, take that stuff pretty hard sometimes. But nonetheless, eventually you sort of shake it off and you kind of move on, and you start trying to use the Alabama game as a little bit of a template of how you get better and where you go from here. So I guess let's start with that, if you don't mind, here for a moment. I think the thing that was most surprising, and you and I talked about that on our post-game show on Saturday, was, man, to begin the game, this Georgia defense, this vaunted Georgia defense, had such a difficult time with Jalen Milroe. You've had a few more days to think about that since then. What do you attribute that to, and how do you clean that up going forward if you are UGA?
Brandon, how's it going, man? But no, man, I've watched the game at least 2 more times, since it ended, and I just kind of felt like there wasn't enough eyes on, Jalen. Him being the most dynamic player on the field, and with him being the quarterback, he touches the ball every play. So he has a chance to change the game, at any moment. So to say that with a guy like that, you have to at least have a spy on him, play a lot of zone, coverage to make sure you always have, eyes on him. When you play the man coverage, you got those wide receivers like Ryan Williams taking the top off the defense. Well, the DB's backs are turned towards the quarterback. So when he does decide to run, it's nobody there. So I just think, like we said on the DawgNation show last week, before the game, just making him stand in the pocket and pick you apart. So I definitely think a lot of zone coverage should have been there, just to allow more eyes and just always having a spy on him, because if you don't, if you forget that he's on the field, then he has those crazy first halves like he had. And then you saw the second half, Georgia said, okay, let's make sure we got eyes on him at all times. And we kind of slowed him down. So that's the difference that I saw.
Well, I'm obviously a big loudmouth here, but I do try to be somewhat humble. And I have to admit, in sort of humble fashion here, when you and I talked last week, I was all about, man, you got to be aggressive. You got to go after this guy. You got to blitz him. You got to do all that kind of stuff. And the best that I can tell, Davin, is in the first half, they really did try to do that. They tried to be aggressive. They tried to get after him. And to Milroe's credit, it just didn't work. Georgia probably missed a couple of tackles, or Milroe just sort of shook free a couple of times. And, that's how they had their offensive success. You had actually talked about what you just said. You did talk about that a little bit more last week. And when the game went to the second half, when Georgia suddenly started having more success against Milroe, it was with what I would describe as a little bit more of a conservative approach defensively, where all of a sudden now you do kind of drop back. You try to, you just try to obviously just sort of maintain and not give him the free lane to run from. And at that point in time, that started seemingly working better. So I'll give you credit. I was out here last week calling for just sending people from every direction come after Milroe. And obviously in the first half, that aggressive approach clearly did not work for UGA.
Right, man. When you blitz, it's them versus you. It's a high risk, very high reward, So if you get there, it's a big play. It's a sack. It's a TFL, or you force the quarterback into making a mistake. But if you don't get there, then all hell breaks loose. And that's kind of what we saw in the beginning. Was Georgia drew up great blitzes, but when it was time for the defensive player to make the play, Jalen Milroe did what he does, and he was the better athlete and got out of those situations. And now, since you're blitzing and you're bringing more guys, you leave your coverage very vulnerable. So those guys can't really focus on Jalen Milroe because they understand that we have more guys going to get him. So it's less guys to protect, the field. So it's just a recipe, for disaster. I played for Greg Williams the last 2 years, and this is the cover zero king, even in the fourth quarter with 30 seconds to go. and also I've had some of my best sack years with him, but also we give up a lot. So when you decide to bring that pressure, man, it's very, high risk, high reward.
How about the other side of the ball? A lot has been made of the Georgia offensive struggles. You and I certainly talked about that plenty on Saturday night, the DawgNation post-game show. Once again, a few more days to think about all of this. Where does Georgia go to get better offensively and, frankly, play more consistent throughout the entirety of the game? Clearly explosive at the end of the game, but how do you play a little better throughout the entirety of the game?
Right. Well, I definitely think with 4 turnovers, it's hard to, overcome that. So first, let's take care of the ball. The turnover ratio is the number one stat that says, win, lose. So if you lose a turnover battle, then you can close your eyes and kind of pick who won the game. So first, let's take care of that. Second, I kind of felt like some of the things I praised Carson Beck on, the first 3 weeks as in not turn over the ball, checking it down. You just gave me my credit on that end. Well, I'm giving you your credit. I definitely think the first 2-3 weeks, I applauded that of not forcing things, but sometimes you play too conservative. And I think that's what happened against Bama, to where when you have that conservative style of, offense, that only works when your defense is playing lights out, your special team is playing lights out, and you have a great running game going well. None of those were going well for us. So you kind of needed to take the training wheels off the offense and open up the playbook a little bit. The positive thing about that is when we did to start to do that, because we had to, because there was no running game and we needed some fourth down, conversions. Carson Beck really made some tight window throws. And I just think going forward, we understand now the big picture of our team, and maybe we don't have those dominant outside areas to where our quarterback can just take care of the ball. Maybe we do need Carson Beck to go out there and for them to open up the playbook.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is obviously a Georgia team filled with coaches and players who are prideful men. They're used to having success. They've had a lot of success, but they lost on Saturday. Now you turn the page to Auburn. What's practice like this week as Georgia gets ready to go back out there and try to get that win? It's a rivalry game. The atmosphere in the stadium we'd expect is pretty good. What's it like for Georgia this week, having been a part, of this program before, at practice this week, getting ready for a game in which they want to erase all the memories of what happened to them last Saturday?
Well, we got a 24-hour rule. So in a win or lose, you celebrate for 24 hours or you mope around for 24 hours. So that's done. I'm pretty sure when they first got back to practice, it's fixing the mistakes. In this conference, with how good these teams are and how good the SEC has already been, and now you throw in the new teams, I don't think any team is going to run the table. Mm-hmm. So in saying that, this race is going to be who can bounce back the fastest, who can fix their mistakes, and who can just let the last game go. I mean, you understand that you're not going to win every game in the SEC, even though you want to. So I know for a fact, with it just being week 3, that we lost, they're not too gung-ho over the loss. You got to keep moving forward because you got another great opponent, coming up. So you got to get some guys, healthy, get guys back as fresh as you can, and really just, move on and expect that you can make the championship game with at least 2 losses, in my opinion. So even though you want to run a table and, you want to win, the aspect of it is early in the season. You never know how this thing is going to, shape up. Some guys are going to get hurt, from other teams. Some guys that are hot right now are going to fall off. So just staying consistent and working on, beating Auburn.
Speaking of beating Auburn, one of my favorite moments from your career was the 2017 SEC championship. And, folks will remember this. And we talked about this a little bit this week because trying to get people excited about this rivalry game. You guys had been so dominant that year. You go into a hostile environment at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Auburn, to its credit, played very well that day. After the game, Gus Malzahn strutting all over the field, talking about beat the dog crap out of Georgia. And, man, Georgia fans were so aggravated by that. And we didn't hear much from y'all publicly about that. And yet, after the SEC championship, when y'all turned the tables on them, beat them 28-7 in Atlanta, you got the sense that there was a little bit of extra juice of, hey, we want to get revenge against this team that beat us. What was that moment like from you, and what do you think that kind of rare instance in which Georgia and Auburn played twice in the same season, what do you think that sort of says about the rivalry that Georgia has with Auburn?
It's a big rivalry even before, I was there. And just to give a little backstory on our senior year, when we all decided to come back, we understood that, the year before, we lost to Vanderbilt
Mm-hmm.
and just some teams that, we should have beat, even though the Hail Mary, against Tennessee. So that whole offseason when everyone decided to come back, we understood that, we lost those games by, a hair. And we really need to go on a revenge tour because we feel like we let a lot of teams off the hook by Hail Marys and just things just wasn't going our way. And we knew we had enough talent to where that was a fluke. So we all wanted to come back. And then we went into a hostile environment. Our team was, beat up. We was the number one team. And I'll never forget it. That was one of the most chaotic environments I've ever been in. I literally felt the ground shaking that game. And that sound bite of him saying, we really beat the dog stuff out of him, we played that in the weight room instead of music. So it was just a reverb. We show beat the dog stuff out of him. We show beat, and it just became like, okay, we're not playing music, we're playing this. So it's ingrained in your head. And when we saw them again, the first thing that I told everyone is, we're going to beat them, when it matters. And they started off hot. I'll never forget. And you can kind of sense the sideline was like, it's this team, our kryptonite. And they was in the red zone again, and that sack just changed the whole game. And then you had a Chubb run and a Swift run, and that just changed the whole game. So just that aspect of thus winning the SEC after a 12-year drought, and we did what we sought out to do. Every team that we had on the whiteboard, in the weight room of our revenge tour, we completed that and we won, the SEC. So it was such a proud moment, to beat Auburn. That was one of my best favorite victories, of that year.
What a great story. Such a fun team and so many great memories, and obviously thankful that Georgia's still making those really fun memories in seasons like this there as well. Davin, love hearing about all that. Love your insight, what's happening for Georgia. We'll do it again on Saturday after what we hope is they win for Georgia against Auburn once again there. Thanks for being here, a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management here today, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Sounds good, man. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed, man. I love that.